Welcome to An American Christmas with Norman Rockwell. You know, when I was a boy, the nativity scene had a donkey instead of a penguin. And I used to write to Santa and ask for things like a bicycle or a train set. I usually got what I wanted. Today, kids ask for a 3D printer, a real live unicorn, or even an iPad. But, you know, what can you expect when Christmas starts in September? Santa Claus has to wear a high-vis jacket, and we call him #SadMan in a sleigh. And we send e-cards instead of real mail, and we wonder whether it's worth all the effort. I'd like to take you back to a gentler kind of Christmas, the kind of Christmas that I grew up with in America. It was decorated and really brought to life by Norman Rockwell, who would become America's most best-loved painter and illustrator. Why? Because he really connected with middle-class Americans for over half a century. He was completely in tune with their sentiments and their aspirations. I was born in a small North Iowa community, a farming community called Rockwell. Now that just happens to be a happy coincidence. But we happened to be a Navy family, and our real life was stationed in Connecticut, halfway between Boston and New York. Norman Rockwell himself was born in a suburb of New York City, and later in his life, he moved further into New England and lived in Vermont and Massachusetts. I knew Norman Rockwell's art from that very early age because his things were always in our house. Hallmark cards year-round with his birthday cards, but especially Christmas cards. There were biscuit tins. There were cereal boxes with Santa Claus painted by Norman Rockwell on the cover. And of course, every week there was a Saturday Evening Post that my mother enjoyed so much. And he did over 330 cover illustrations for that one magazine alone. I remember sleigh rides and trimming the tree. One of the things about the tree, it was always too tall, and my dad had to climb up on a little stepladder and snip the top off so it would fit in the room. And I always wondered how Santa Claus came down the chimney, because we didn't have one. But our neighbors did, and they didn't have children. So obviously, Santa Claus came down our neighbor's chimney, and then he sneaked into our house with all the gifts for my sister and myself. Rockwell's career began when he was still a teenager. Fresh out of art school, he got a big break, and he was made art director and then editor of Boys Life magazine, which was the official magazine of the Boy Scouts of America. What he really wanted to do was to be a freelance artist and work for the Saturday Evening Post, which is America's best-loved magazine of the time. And they had fabulous artists doing illustrations for them. That's what he really wanted to do. So he submitted sketches, some ideas, and they gave him a chance. So he soon left Boys Life magazine, and he worked freelance for the rest of his life, working on all kinds of magazines, 20 or 30 different ones from around the nation. When you look at Rockwell's style, you're thinking, is he an illustrator? Is he a cartoonist? Is he a painter? Is he a designer? Well, actually, because of the kind of work he did and where it had to succeed on the news shelf, he had to be a little bit of all of those. But you decide when you see some more of his images. Rockwell's moral compass was mainstream on Main Street, USA. Look at the young lady getting a telling off by the man who delivers the milk. You can't believe how much trouble she's in for getting home after the milk is being delivered in the morning. And the teachers, we never gave them any lip. We just gave them boxes of candy, flowers, please and thank you. I'm not sure it would be that easy being a teacher today. Of course, life was never as perfect as that. There were plenty of problems in America. Rockwell certainly wished that these problems would go away. He wished that life could be the way it was in his home, where the color of the skin didn't matter, and that education did matter for everyone. Now have a good look at this image. You can see the white dress. Yes, it draws your eye to the little girl being protected by FBI agents on the way to school, but also it draws you straight to her school books. And that is the key story within the story. Rockwell always told us that hard work was to be appreciated and really admired, and that it would be Mother who really did all the heavy lifting. Mother we paid our respect to. Mother, her word was iron in his house. Certainly in my house too. My mother's word was iron. And look at the way he's painted her, tending the child, the sick child in bed. It's almost as if there was a halo glowing around her hair. Rockwell certainly thought that Christmas was the time of the year when you could bring out the best in people. But of course, he was really trying to do that throughout the year, no matter whether it was Christmas or not. And he was certainly an artist who would never, ever offend you. He brought us simple home truths in the work that he produced. Today, we're all afraid of some of the digital scams that come knocking on us 24 hours a day. But there are digital scams in his lifetime too. Have a look at this picture. Look where the fingers are. The digits then were flesh and bone. All I want for Christmas is, yes, what is it that Norman Rockwell really wished for Christmas? Well, he just wished that life would be simple and wonderful for everyone, the way it was in his own home at Christmas time. He very much referred to Charles Dickens and the wonderful stories that Dickens would portray at Christmas time and the English Yuletide tradition. Why did he do this? Well, because Dickens had been a family favorite in the home where he grew up. And remember, he's living in New York City as a child. And New York City, before that, was New Amsterdam. And so he has a unique sort of allegiance to the western part of Europe through the colonial Dutch and the colonial English in particular. And so Dickens becomes an early family favorite. But his real idea of the ideal Christmas is so simple. Family, food, and simple fun. You don't need to spend a lot to have a wonderful Christmas. That's the way he wished it was for everyone else, because that's the way it was in the home where he grew up. I love this picture of the little boy in front of the dresser. We know he's a good little boy, much more on the side of the angels than the devil. And we identify with him. Whether as children or as adults, we've all been there before, haven't we? Somehow caught in a place where we really shouldn't be. So how is it that Rockwell actually did achieve his particular magic? Well, this image, we see a boy who looks a bit surprised as he spies Santa Claus. Not quite. He's got some of the effects of Santa Claus. It's sort of like Santa Claus in mufti. Well, this is an actual scene that Norman Rockwell observed on a suburban train on his way home one day. He went into a studio and he conjured it up. He had a set built that looks just like this. It's supposed to be like the inside of a railway carriage. Although you can't really tell it's a railway carriage, but that doesn't matter because the story is what's happening between the boy and the older man who must have been, say, a Santa Claus from a department store. And indeed, look at what the boy is carrying. Yes, he's come from that department store. But it's the detail that helps you understand that story. The clothes, the casting, the boy, he got it just right. The Santa Claus and what he's wearing, everything is just right. And he puts all these things together, but he doesn't try to make it photorealistic. It's just loose enough that you can feel his breath upon it, bringing it to life. It's just loose enough. It really makes it all the more powerful. So he really is a great painter as well as a wonderful illustrator. Before we leave this picture, the other thing I want you to notice is how much light there is in it. Light surrounds the two main characters. That's where the story is. But he was wonderful at the way he could produce light. It's just glaringly obvious. He was so skillful at using light that he could do this too. And now we see this image of the little boy in the big comfortable chair, and there's hardly any light in it at all. Chiaroscuro. It's just the opposite, just a glimmer of light surrounded by darkness, but it pulls you in. Yes, you see the little boy, but behind him, over his shoulder, you see Santa Claus. And this is directing us to the role of parents at Christmas time, loving, caring, protecting. Now, this is absolutely the way that I remember Christmas. Look at all of that food. Yes, it's a land of bounty. It's an enormous turkey. Giblet gravy, there's roast potatoes, there's all kinds of desserts, there's cinnamon carrots, roasted potatoes too. Just fantastic. And also notice there's no alcohol on Rockwell's table, only water. We certainly trust an artist when we identify with the story or the emotion that he is portraying. Here, Grandpa comes across this wonderful snowman that his little grandson has made. It's got Grandpa written on it. And he looks at that, and then he looks at the face, and you realize it's almost like a mirror image. It really is him. It's amazing how he can take us to these places where we identify with multi-generational love and affection and the meaning of all of that. He is such a moralist, and he brings it down to earth and illustrates it in the most exciting ways. Norman Rockwell did not paint for the art gallery. He was a commercial artist. He was painting for the shop shelf. He was helping to sell the magazine. And his cover that he was painting, that he was producing, was probably the most important thing that the magazine itself could do to sell themselves. And think about that situation even today. You go into a newsagent, you look at the magazine rack, you don't know where to begin until something catches your eye. So every magazine cover that he did had to compete with the magazine covers on either side, up and down, as well as side to side. Something had to stand out. So one of the techniques he used was this big circle, this bullseye for the eye. Now you could say that what he's doing is what poster artists often do. But his job was even a little bit more difficult because poster artists are in control of the entire space. But not when you're doing a magazine cover. You have to compete with a masthead, with a list of the stories that are contained inside, perhaps even the price tag. So when we pull back, you can see exactly how he was able to make his image stand out and grab attention from everything else that was on that magazine shelf. When I was a boy, I think this is the way that I used to think it might feel if I ever met God face to face. And I have to say I was terrified at the prospect, I think I would feel just that absolutely tiny bit of humanity facing God. Today, I think very few children even understand that Father Christmas, Santa Claus, Saint Nick, that he really is inspired by a saint. But Rockwell doesn't forget that. And if you look very closely, you will see a halo around Saint Nick's head. And how many times do you see that today? Hardly ever. You never see a halo around Saint Nick's face anymore. Now you can see from the date of this particular image from the Saturday Evening Post that it's 1928. And it's the apex of the Roaring Twenties. But there's no Art Deco coming out of Norman Rockwell. No, it's Dickens. And Dickens, why Dickens? I told you because it was a family favorite. But it's the rollicking good time. He wants people to have a good time, dance, get up, have a great time at Christmas. And I think this is part of the evidence of why Rockwell was so popular for over 50 years. His style, and I think it's because his beliefs never really changed in those 50 years. You don't see an evolution of his work. His style isn't changing decade after decade. I think he gets better and better, perhaps as a technician, but he has an uncanny ability to tell stories and a wonderful ability to pick the right stories to tell. Through the American Depression, Norman Rockwell kept bringing us the good times. Look at this. Grandpa's certainly having a good time, a great time on that rocking horse. Grandson isn't having so much fun, is he? It's obviously a gift from Grandpa, but Grandpa, he's the one on there who's really rocking. We make eye contact with him. He smiles back at us. Golly, we want him to have a good time because we want to have a good time too. Home and time for Christmas. Look how wonderfully and simply Rockwell is able to put you in the picture. You can see what it feels like to be welcomed home by everyone who loves you. Family, friends, they're all just so glad to see you. You've had an awful trip to get there, but you've made it. Your suitcase is bulging, things are falling apart. They don't mind that you're late, they just want to see you. And who's that in the crowd? Looks suspiciously like Norman Rockwell himself, doesn't it? Also, from the back. It's a self-portrait, front and back. But the key thing is he puts you in the picture. This particular commission was for a Thanksgiving Day image. Now, you can't really tell that because it's just a loose illustration at this stage. It isn't a Christmas image, but I'm not going to apologize for that because it's still very relevant to the way that Rockwell worked. And I want you to really look at this illustration very carefully and work out what you think needs to be changed. What is it? Well, let me give you one clue. You see the cat down in the corner? Well, I got to tell you, that cat is a video vampire. That cat will suck the blood out of the rest of the story. The cat has to go. Will anything replace the cat? You understand, I think, enough from the illustration that it's a mother and son, and that he's a young soldier, perhaps home for a break from the war or just from serving before he goes overseas. Anyway, let's see what Norman Rockwell did to this sketch to turn it into what I think is one of his wonderful masterpieces. So the cat was ditched. He's put in a pumpkin, but that's just to kind of tell us that it's November. And of course, there's Thanksgiving written along the bottom of it. Thanksgiving occurs on the fourth Thursday of every November. But look what else he's done. Comprehensively, he's turned it literally around. Mother and son are now looking at each other. They're just basking in the love from being with one another. The stove is gone. Maybe that was a little bit too distracting as well for Rockwell. He just wants you to focus on the mother and the son together. It's just so lovely. And these kind of things create memories for us, don't they? You can remember your own mother in that situation. Or maybe you are a mother, you're remembering being with your own son in that situation. He really brings out the warmth and the value of home, of family, and friends. Just as before, when we had the little girl going to school wearing the white dress, here Rockwell has given Mother a white apron, clean, bright, white, and that really draws us straight to her. Remember, Mother is so wonderfully important in the home, in Rockwell's home, as the one who drives and masters every situation. So the white is a bright light. It's a beacon of Mother's love for her son. This is Shuffleton's barbershop. Most critics would agree that this is perhaps Norman Rockwell's greatest piece as a painter. It certainly connects with 17th century Dutch realists. Look at the way he's treated the light. Now, the way he produced this was not by recreating it in his studio. No, this is a kind of a one-off. This is the place where he went every month to have his own haircut, Shuffleton's barbershop. He hired a professional photographer who took 16 separate photographs inside the barbershop and from outside, as you can see. And then he sort of put them in front of himself, and he started to paint. And all of these things merged and amalgamated in his own mind as he just assimilated the 16 photographs. Black and white they were too. And he assimilated this through the power of his brush to create this image. It was at a very dark time in the Rockwell household. His wife, Mary, was in an abyss of depression. And it is as if Rockwell feels there is some light still there. Or maybe there's light at the end of the tunnel. I don't know, but he draws us to that light as if it's a tunnel of hope. Owned by George Lucas, surely this is Rockwell's greatest image of morality. And it is based, again, on something that he witnessed, this time in a train station in Baltimore on his way back from having a meeting with the President of the United States over some propaganda posters that he would be producing. And the detail is there, the dirty cups, the filthy plates, the onlookers, everybody's a little bit sort of shabby in the way they look. And the white shirt that the boy is wearing. It pulls you in. Again, it's a spotlight on grace. The praying hands, Mother saying grace in a restaurant, regardless of what anybody else thinks. It's Mother at her best, the moral compass in the family. So, what will Christmas bring for this year? Well, there's one way to make sure that it isn't canceled. Bring a little bit of Norman Rockwell into your Christmas. He's certainly someone who will never cancel Christmas. I hope you get what you want for yourselves and for your loved ones. Meanwhile, I'm just going to leave by the chimney. Bye.
Ho, 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 ho.